Cool.
Well, first, I'm very, very pleased to be here. I want to thank the Elegba Folklore Society for inviting me. I don't get down to Richmond very often, and it's been a wonderful experience. Well-organized program, a lot of positive energy. You get a sense that we are people with a purpose. So it's just been a wonderful day. I'm just very happy. I hope that my presentation contributed something positive. But the whole day has been quite good, in honor of Nelson Mandela and, of course, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. So it's been a good day.
Give thanks and praises. Give thanks and praises. You've been putting in a lot of work over the years, showing the African presence around the world. Do you mind just briefly, for the people who didn't catch the presentation, just briefly telling us a little bit about that?
Well, humanity begins in Africa.
Yes.
And human culture begins in Africa. And classical civilization begins in Africa. I say those things because most of the time we don't associate Africa with those kinds of developments. We don't view Africa with that eye. We tend to view Africa as a backward, bombed out kind of wasteland. There are 2 Africas. There's the Africa before the Maafa and the Africa since the Maafa. And we think, at least I think, that it's very important for Africans in the diaspora to have a positive view of Africa. We need Africa, and Africa needs us. But if our view of Africa is a negative one, then our contribution to Africa is going to be a negative one. So we want to build up our self-esteem. We want to reinforce our African identity. We want to get people enthusiastic about Africa. We want people to be able to say, I may not be born in Africa, but I'm as much an African as somebody from Congo or Central African Republic. And so I think that is really something that we try to push. That's what comes out of my presentations. But in addition to that African people traveled all over the world before the advent of enslavement. And we have an ancient diaspora that starts in Asia, that incorporates Europe, that looks at Australia and the Pacific, and even the Americas before Columbus and before enslavement. I think if we can push these kinds of themes, then we're moving in the right direction.
Is there any message that you'd like to give the youth of the day?
Don't give up. Don't give up. And look beyond enslavement. And be able to see that life is about more than material things. That it's also about consciousness. It's also about culture. That we are people with a history, that we have a story that's barely been told, and we have a history that's second to none. And that the future depends on them. Yes. That history didn't begin with slavery, it didn't begin with colonization, it didn't begin with Chicken George, it didn't begin with Kunta Kinte. That we are a great and mighty people, and if we understand that, we can continue to be a great and mighty people.
Could you just mention a few of your works and books and your website for the people, so if they want to visit and see more?
I have, I think, 6 books in print. I have a book called African Star Over Asia. That's my newest book. It's the most comprehensive book on the African presence in Asia that's ever been written. I have another book called Black Star Over Europe, about the contributions of African people to that part of the world. I have a small travel book. I have 2 French language books. One that is my travel essays and another one on Asia. I have another book in French on travels around the world. I'm working on 3 or 4 other manuscripts. One on great African leaders, one on great African women, another one on the African presence in major world museums. And I'm doing another book that I expect is going to take at least the next 10 or 15 years of my life. And that is the African presence in Australia and the Pacific. Nobody's ever done that before.
Right.
I want to talk about how they see themselves. I want to talk about the impact of Garvey in Australia, the Black Power movement. I want to talk about black people not just as victims, but as people who've always resisted, people who've always tried to maintain their basic sense of humanity. And I want to show the links between these different groups of black people scattered around the far corners of the earth.
Okay. Well, we thank you, Brother Runoko, for all that you've done over the years and for joining us here in Richmond, VA, on behalf of the Elegba Folklore Society. We look forward to all of your future works, and again, we want to say thank you.
I look forward to returning, and thank you.
All right. Give thanks and praise.
Right.
What's up?